The pistol shot echoed across the canyon just as Ryder Owens crested the ridge, and his gut told him someone was in serious trouble before he even saw the overturned stagecoach bleeding smoke into the twilight sky. He urged his mare forward, leather creaking as he leaned into the descent. The November air in southern Arizona territory carried the bite of coming winter, unusual for a place most folks thought stayed hot year-round. Independence was still a full day's ride south, and out here between Tucson and the border, a person could die from exposure, bandits, or plain bad luck before anyone would find their bones. As Ryder approached, his hand instinctively moved to his holster. The stagecoach lay on its side like a wounded animal, one wheel still spinning lazily. 2 horses were gone from the traces, probably bolted during whatever caused the wreck. No bodies visible, but that shot had come from somewhere close. "Hello," his voice carried across the rocks. "Anyone need help?" Silence answered him, thick and waiting. Then a woman's voice, strained but steady. "I have a gun, mister, and I will use it if you mean harm." Ryder raised both hands, keeping them visible. "Madam, I am just passing through." Heard the commotion and came to see if assistance was needed. "Name is Ryder Owens, and I have no ill intentions." A figure emerged from behind the wreckage, and even in the failing light, Ryder could see she was in bad shape. Her dress was torn, face smudged with dirt and what might have been blood, and yes, she did indeed have a small pistol aimed in his general direction with hands that shook from either cold or shock or both. "The driver," she said, her voice cracking. "He is dead. His neck broke when we went over." The horses panicked when a rattlesnake spooked them right at the canyon edge. Ryder slowly dismounted, keeping his movements careful and obvious. "That is a terrible thing. Are you injured?" "Bruised, but nothing broken, I think." She lowered the gun slightly, exhaustion winning over caution. "I've been here 3 hours. I fired that shot hoping someone might hear, but I did not expect anyone to actually come." He moved closer now, and in the last rays of sunlight he could make out her features properly. She was around his age, maybe 25 to his 28, with auburn hair coming loose from its pins and green eyes that held both intelligence and fear. Despite the dirt and distress, something about her bearing suggested education, refinement. "We need to get you warm and safe," Ryder said, already assessing their situation. "It will be full dark in 20 minutes and the temperature drops hard out here. Do you have supplies from the coach?" She shook her head. "Most of it is trapped underneath. I managed to pull out 1 canteen and a blanket, but that is all." Ryder looked at his horse, then at the darkening sky, then back at the woman. His mind was already doing the mathematics of survival, and he did not like the answer it was giving him. He had food and water for 1 person, 1 bedroll, and a horse that was already tired from a full day of riding. But he also had no choice about what came next. "Madam, I am going to be direct because we do not have time for niceties. My name is Ryder and I need yours." "Georgia Ellsworth," she said. "Well, Miss Ellsworth, here is our situation. Independence is about 25 miles south. In daylight with a rested horse and 1 rider, that is maybe 6 hours. In the dark, with rocky terrain and 2 people on 1 mount, we are looking at double that, maybe more. And it is going to get cold enough tonight that exposure is a real danger." Georgia hugged herself, the blanket she had retrieved wrapped around her shoulders. "What are you suggesting?" "That we stay here tonight, build a fire, wait for dawn. But come morning, you need to take my horse and ride for Independence. There is a doctor there named Morrison and the sheriff is called Hayes. Both are good men. You tell them what happened and where I am, and they will send someone back." "And what will you do?" Her eyes widened as understanding dawned. No, I cannot take your horse and leave you stranded here. You can and you will. Ryder's tone left no room for argument. I am a cattleman, Miss Ellsworth. I know this territory, I know how to survive, and I have done it before. You are in shock. You are injured even if you do not realize how badly yet, and you need medical attention. When you get to town, you send help back. Simple as that. There is nothing simple about abandoning someone in the middle of nowhere. It is not abandoning if it is the plan. He was already moving back to his horse, pulling down his bedroll and saddlebags. Now let us see about getting that fire started before we lose the light entirely. Georgia stood frozen for a moment, clearly torn between propriety, pride, and practical necessity. Finally, survival instinct won out and she nodded. Very well, but I am helping with the fire. They worked quickly, gathering what dried brush and wood they could find in the rocky landscape. Ryder had matches in his saddlebag, and within 15 minutes, they had a decent fire going in a sheltered spot near the overturned coach. The flames pushed back the darkness and cold, creating a small bubble of warmth and light against the vast Arizona night. Ryder gave Georgia most of his provisions. She protested, but he insisted, pointing out that she would need her strength for the ride tomorrow. They ate jerky and hardtack in silence, the fire crackling between them. Above, stars were beginning to emerge in ridiculous numbers, the way they only did far from any town or city. May I ask what brings you to Independence? Ryder ventured after a while. Georgia stared into the flames. I am a school teacher, or I am supposed to be. The town posted an advertisement back in Philadelphia for someone educated to teach their children. I applied, was accepted, and here I am. Or here I was supposed to be 3 days ago. Philadelphia is a long way from Arizona territory. It is a long way from my previous life, which is rather the point. There was something in her voice, a weight of story she was not ready to share. Ryder recognized that tone. He had used it himself often enough. Well, Independence is a decent town, he offered. Growing fast since the silver strikes up north, plenty of families with children who need teaching. You will do well there. If I survive to arrive. Georgia pulled the blanket tighter. I am sorry, that was ungracious. You saved my life tonight, Mr. Owens. I should not be so grim. Ryder, please, and you have every right to be shaken. You survived a stagecoach crash and lost the driver. That would rattle anyone. They fell silent again. The fire popped and hissed. Somewhere in the darkness, a coyote called, answered by another miles away. Ryder found himself studying Georgia when he thought she was not looking. Even disheveled and exhausted, there was something compelling about her. A strength in how she held herself, a directness in her gaze. She had fired that shot to signal for help, had held a gun on him until she was sure of his intentions, had not dissolved into hysterics despite everything. This was not some pampered Eastern lady playing at frontier life. This was someone made of steel underneath. You should try to rest, Ryder said eventually. Dawn comes early and you have a hard ride ahead. What about you? I will keep the fire going and keep watch. Out here, you always want someone awake. Georgia looked like she wanted to argue, but exhaustion was clearly winning. She arranged herself as comfortably as possible near the fire, using her carpetbag as a pillow. Within minutes, her breathing had evened out into sleep. Ryder sat with his back against a rock, rifle across his knees, and watched the night. He thought about his ranch north of Independence, the small spread he had been building for 5 years now. Thought about the cattle he had just sold in Tucson, the money in his saddlebag that represented 6 months of hard work. Thought about how life could change in an instant. How one moment you were riding home and the next you were giving away your horse to a stranger because it was the right thing to do. His mare, Juniper, dozed standing near the fire. She was a good horse, steady and smart, with enough Arabian blood to give her endurance. He had raised her from a foal, and the thought of parting with her brought an unexpected tightness to his chest. But there was no other option. Georgia needed that horse more than he did, at least for the next day or so. The night deepened. Ryder fed the fire and kept his vigil, watching the way the flames painted gold across Georgia's sleeping face, wondering what had driven a Philadelphia schoolteacher all the way to the Arizona territory, wondering if he would ever see her again after tomorrow. Dawn came slowly, painting the eastern sky in shades of rose and gold. Ryder had kept the fire going through the night, and now he built it up one last time to warm them both before the journey ahead. Georgia stirred, wincing as bruises made themselves known. "Good morning," Ryder said, offering her some jerky and the last of the water. "How are you feeling?" "Like I was in a stagecoach accident." She managed a small smile. "But alive, thanks to you." They ate a quick breakfast, and then Ryder began preparing Juniper for the journey. He checked the saddle carefully, adjusted the stirrups for Georgia's shorter legs, and transferred everything from his saddlebags except what she would need. "The trail south is well marked," he explained, pointing. "You follow that ridge line until you see the Twin Peaks. Independence sits in the valley beyond. Juniper knows the way. Give her her head if you get confused, and she will take you there." Georgia stood beside the mare, one hand on the saddle, clearly wrestling with the situation. "Mr. Owens, Ryder, this is too much. I cannot take your horse and leave you here with nothing." "You are not leaving me with nothing. I have water, I have my rifle, and I have the knowledge that I am doing the right thing." He met her eyes. "Miss Ellsworth, in the time I have been out here, I have learned that civilization is not buildings and laws. It is people choosing to help each other when help is needed. You need this horse more than I do right now. In a day or two, when you send back help, I will have it again. Simple as that." "Nothing about this is simple." Her voice was soft. "But I understand, and I am grateful, more grateful than I can express." Ryder helped her mount, noting how she winced but did not complain. Once she was settled, he handed her the reins. "Ride steady, not fast. Juniper will get you there. And Miss Ellsworth, when you get to Independence, you ask for a man named Thomas Morrison. He is the doctor, and he will see to those bruises. Tell him Ryder Owens sent you." Georgia looked down at him from the saddle, and in the fresh morning light, Ryder could see tears in her green eyes. "I will send help immediately. I promise you that. I know you will." She hesitated one more moment, as if there were something else she wanted to say. Then she squeezed the mare's sides gently, and Juniper started forward. Ryder watched them go, watched as horse and rider became smaller against the vast landscape, watched until they disappeared around the ridge and he was alone with the dead driver, the wrecked stage, and the rising sun. The day was going to be hot. Already he could feel the temperature climbing, the cold of night burning away. Ryder set about making himself as comfortable as possible. He moved the driver's body into what shade he could find and said a few words over him, not knowing if the man had been religious but figuring it could not hurt. He salvaged what he could from the wreckage, managing to free one trunk that contained women's clothing. Georgia's things, he assumed, though they would do him no good. He also found a small lockbox that probably contained company money or payroll, and he left it sealed and visible so when help arrived, no one could accuse him of theft. The morning crawled by. Ryder rationed his water carefully, knowing that was his most critical resource. He had enough for maybe 2 days if he was careful, 3 if he was very lucky. Help should arrive well before then, but out here, you planned for the worst and hoped for the best. He tried to stay in the shade, tried not to move more than necessary. The sun climbed higher, and the temperature climbed with it. November in southern Arizona could be deceptive. The mornings and evenings were cold, but midday could still hit 80 degrees or more. Ryder pulled his hat low, wrapped his bandana around his neck to prevent sunburn, and settled in to wait. His thoughts kept drifting to Georgia. He wondered if she had made good time, if Juniper was treating her well. He found himself hoping she would like independence, that the town would welcome her properly. A schoolteacher was valuable in a frontier town, someone who brought education and culture. She would probably have her pick of suitors within a month. The thought bothered him more than it should have. They had known each other less than 12 hours. She was a stranger, someone fate had thrown into his path. And yet there had been something in their brief interaction, a connection he could not quite name. The way she had looked at him in the firelight. The strength in her voice even when she was clearly terrified. The gratitude and guilt in her eyes this morning when she took his horse. Ryder shook his head, dismissing the thoughts. He was being foolish, rating romance into a simple act of necessity. Come tomorrow, he would have his horse back. Georgia would be settled with the Morrisons or whoever took in new arrivals, and life would continue as it had before. The sun reached its zenith. Ryder dozed in the shade, dreamed of water and cool mountain streams, woke with his throat dry and gritty. He allowed himself a small sip from his canteen, swished it around his mouth before swallowing. The afternoon stretched ahead like the landscape itself, endless and waiting. Meanwhile, Georgia urged Juniper forward along the trail, her body aching with every step the horse took. The mare was as steady as Ryder had promised, seeming to know where she was going without much guidance. Georgia found herself grateful beyond measure for this horse, for the man who had given her up, for the strange twist of fate that had put Ryder Owens on that ridge at exactly the right moment. She had not been entirely honest with him last night. Yes, she was a schoolteacher, and yes, she had accepted a position in independence. But she had left out the part about running, about the man in Philadelphia her father had wanted her to marry, about the life of suffocating propriety and expectation she had fled. Coming west was not just about a job. It was about freedom, about choosing her own path for the first time in her 25 years. And now, before she had even arrived, she had met a man who embodied everything she was seeking. Self-sufficient, capable, kind without being soft, someone who could make hard decisions and live with the consequences. Ryder Owens had given her his horse, had sat up all night to keep her safe, had asked for nothing in return except that she ride for help. What kind of man did that for a complete stranger? The kind she wanted to know better, Georgia realized. The kind she wanted to talk to without the shadow of disaster hanging over them. The kind who made her wonder what might be possible in this new life she was building. Twin Peaks emerged on the horizon just as the sun was starting its afternoon descent. Georgia felt a surge of relief and pushed Juniper a little faster. The mare responded willingly, and soon they were descending into a valley where a town spread out like a promise. Independence. She had made it. The main street was wide and dusty, lined with the usual assortment of frontier buildings. A general store, a saloon, a bank, a hotel. People moved about their business, pausing to stare at the dirt-covered woman on the beautiful Arabian mare. Georgia ignored the looks and headed straight for the largest building, hoping it might house the law. She was in luck. A sign proclaimed it the sheriff's office, and she practically fell off the horse in her haste to dismount. Her legs nearly gave out when her feet hit the ground, but she steadied herself and pushed through the door. A man looked up from a desk, middle-aged and weathered, with a star pinned to his vest. "Can I help you, miss? Sheriff Hayes?" Georgia asked, remembering the name Ryder had given her. "That is me." The words poured out of her then, the whole story. The stagecoach accident, the dead driver, Ryder Owens appearing out of nowhere to help her, his insistence that she take his horse and ride for help. She saw the sheriff's expression shift from routine interest to serious attention as she spoke. "Ryder Owens gave you his horse," Hayes repeated, standing up. "And he is still out there, you say, about 25 miles north?" "Yes, near the canyon ridge. Please, we have to send help immediately." "He has been alone since dawn." Hayes was already moving, grabbing his hat and coat. "Sam," he bellowed, "get horses ready, full supplies. We are riding out to fetch Ryder." He turned back to Georgia. "Miss, you did right coming straight here. Now you need to see the doctor." "That is Tom Morrison. His office is 2 buildings down. You tell him what happened and he will fix you up proper. But the rescue will happen faster if you are not slowing us down by collapsing." Hayes' voice was gruff but not unkind. "You have done your part. Now let us do ours." Georgia wanted to argue, wanted to be part of the rescue party, but her body was already betraying her. The adrenaline that had kept her going was fading, and the bruises and exhaustion were catching up fast. She nodded reluctantly. "The horse," she said. "Juniper. She needs water and rest." "I will see to her personally," Hayes promised. "Now go." Georgia made her way to the doctor's office on unsteady legs. The sign read Thomas Morrison, physician, in neat lettering. She knocked, and a kindly-looking man in his 50s answered. "Dr. Morrison, my name is Georgia Ellsworth. Ryder Owens sent me." At the mention of Ryder's name, Morrison's entire demeanor shifted to focused attention. Come in. Let me look at you." The next hour passed in a blur of examination and treatment. Morrison was thorough and gentle, checking for broken bones and internal injuries, cleaning cuts, applying salve to bruises that were already turning spectacular shades of purple. All the while, Georgia answered his questions about the accident and about Ryder. "That boy has a heart bigger than this whole territory," Morrison said as he wrapped a bandage around Georgia's badly scraped forearm. "Gave you Juniper, did he? He loves that horse. Raised her himself." The words made Georgia feel even worse about the situation. "The sheriff has gone to get him. Hayes is the best tracker in 3 counties, and he knows Ryder. They will find him before nightfall, you mark my words." Morrison stepped back, surveying his work. "You are lucky, Miss Ellsworth. Aside from bruises and scrapes, you are remarkably intact. That stagecoach could have killed you as easily as it killed poor Jacobson." "Jacobson was the driver." "Yes. Good man, family in Tucson. This will be hard news for them." Morrison's expression was somber. "But you survived, and Ryder will be fine. Now you need food, rest, and a bath, in that order. I am going to take you to my home. My wife Martha will see you settled." "I could not impose, young lady. You are the new school teacher for this town. That makes you important to all of us. Besides, you are in no condition to argue. Come along." Georgia found herself bundled off to the Morrison home, a comfortable house on the edge of town. Martha Morrison was a warm, bustling woman who took one look at Georgia and immediately went into mothering mode. Before Georgia could protest, she was seated at a kitchen table with hot soup in front of her, and Martha was already heating water for a bath. "You poor dear," Martha kept saying. "What an awful welcome to independence. But you are safe now, and we will take care of you." The soup was the best thing Georgia had ever tasted. She had not realized how hungry she was, how depleted. As she ate, she found herself telling Martha the whole story, just as she had told the sheriff and the doctor. And with each retelling, her admiration for Ryder Owens grew. He had saved her life, possibly more than once. First by appearing when he did, then by keeping her safe through the night, and finally by giving her the means to reach safety even at great cost to himself. Ryder is special. Martha agreed when Georgia voiced some of this. He came here 5 years ago with nothing but a horse, a rifle, and determination. Built his ranch from scratch, never asked for handouts, always ready to help a neighbor. Half the young women in town have set their caps at him, but he never seems interested. Georgia felt an unexpected flutter at those words. Why not? Martha shrugged. My Tom thinks he is still healing from something. He never talks about where he came from or what drove him west. Just works hard and keeps to himself mostly. Though he is friendly enough at church socials and town gatherings. The bathwater was ready, and Georgia sank into it gratefully, letting the hot water ease her battered muscles. Martha had provided her with clean clothes, a simple dress that fit well enough. As Georgia washed away the dust and blood of the past day, she thought about Ryder still out there in the wilderness, waiting for rescue. Please let him be all right, she prayed silently. Please let the sheriff find him quickly. Evening was falling when Sheriff Hayes and his men reached the canyon ridge. They had ridden hard, and Hayes had read the signs easily. There was the overturned stagecoach, right where Georgia had described. And there, sitting calm as you please in the shade of a rock, was Ryder Owens. Took you long enough, Ryder called out as they approached, a grin on his face. I was starting to think Miss Ellsworth had decided to keep Juniper for herself. Hayes swung down from his saddle, relief evident despite his gruff exterior. You damn fool! You gave away your horse to a stranger. I gave away my horse to a lady in need. There is a difference. Ryder stood, accepting the canteen Hayes offered and drinking deeply. She made it to town all right, rode straight to my office, told us where to find you. She is with the Morrisons now, getting patched up and fed. Hayes looked around at the scene. Jacobson is dead, broke his neck in the crash. Body is over there, I said what words I could over him. Ryder's voice was somber. Rattlesnake spooked the team right at the worst possible spot. Bad luck all around. They loaded Jacobson's body onto one of the pack horses, salvaged what they could from the wreck, and secured the lockbox. As the sun set, they made camp for the night. Hayes had brought Juniper, and Ryder was reunited with his mare, running his hands over her neck and murmuring greetings. She treat Miss Ellsworth well? He asked. Got her to town safe and sound, Hayes confirmed. That woman was mighty torn up about leaving you behind, wanted to be part of the rescue party. Ryder felt that same odd flutter he had experienced the night before. She seems like someone who would feel that way. Hayes gave him a long look. She is pretty too, in case you were wondering. I was not wondering. Sure you were not. Hayes grinned. She is the new school teacher, you know, going to be living in Independence permanent-like. Ryder did not respond, but his mind was already racing ahead. Georgia would be in town. He would see her again. He could check on her properly, make sure she was recovering well. And maybe, just maybe, he could get to know her beyond a single night in the wilderness. They rode into Independence late the following morning. Word had spread about the stagecoach accident and Ryder's role in saving the schoolteacher, and people came out to greet them. Ryder felt embarrassed by the attention, trying to deflect praise and insisting he had just done what anyone would have done. Not anyone, Thomas Morrison said, meeting them at the sheriff's office. Most men would have tried to ride double or would have left her to fend for herself. You made the smart choice and the kind one. How is Miss Ellsworth? Ryder asked, trying to sound casual. Banged up but healing well. Martha has her at the house, spoiling her something fierce. Morrison smiled. She has been asking after you every hour, wants to thank you proper. That is not necessary. It is necessary to her. Come on, I will take you over. You look like you could use a good meal yourself. Ryder found himself being shepherded to the Morrison house. still dusty from the trail and suddenly nervous in a way that had nothing to do with stagecoaches or survival. He was going to see Georgia again in daylight, in civilization, without crisis to distract from whatever this was building between them. Martha Morrison met them at the door, beaming. "Ryder Owens, you are a hero whether you like it or not. Come in, come in. Georgia has been beside herself waiting for word of you." And there she was, standing in the parlor, cleaned up and wearing a borrowed dress, her auburn hair neatly pinned. The bruises on her face were visible but not as bad as they could have been, and when she saw Ryder, her entire face lit up in a way that made his heart skip. "Mr. Owens," Georgia said, and her voice was full of emotion. "You are safe, thank God." "Miss Ellsworth," Ryder replied, suddenly aware of how he must look, trail-worn and dusty, needing a shave and probably smelling of horse. "I am glad to see you recovered." They stood there for a moment, just looking at each other, and Ryder felt the room fall away. There was something in her eyes, something that matched what he was feeling. Recognition, connection, the beginning of something that could be important if they let it. Martha cleared her throat meaningfully. "Well, I will just go check on dinner. Tom, why do not you help me? Give these two a chance to talk proper." The Morrisons made themselves scarce, and Ryder and Georgia were alone. She moved closer to him, her expression serious. "I cannot thank you enough," she began. "You saved my life, you gave me your horse, you spent a night and a day in the wilderness alone. All for a stranger." "Why?" Ryder met her eyes. "Because it was the right thing to do, because you needed help and I could provide it, and because you were not a stranger, not really. From the moment I heard your voice in the darkness, you were someone who mattered." George's breath caught. "I felt the same. Is that strange? We barely know each other." "Maybe we know each other better than we think. The wilderness has a way of showing you who people really are." Ryder took a careful step closer. "I would like to know you better, Miss Ellsworth, if you would allow it." "I would like that very much, Mr. Owens. And please call me Georgia." "Then you should call me Ryder." They stood close now, not quite touching but aware of each other in every possible way. The moment stretched, full of possibility and promise. Then Martha called from the kitchen that dinner was ready, breaking the spell but not the feeling over the next weeks. Ryder found himself in town far more often than usual. He told himself it was to check on Georgia's recovery, to make sure she was settling in well. But the truth was simpler and more complicated. He wanted to see her, wanted to talk to her, wanted to be near her. Georgia had taken up her teaching position, and by all accounts she was excellent at it. The children loved her, and their parents appreciated her dedication and knowledge. She lived in a small house behind the schoolhouse, and Ryder found himself making excuses to ride past, to stop in and check if she needed anything. They took walks together in the evenings when the weather was fine. They talked about everything and nothing. Georgia told him about Philadelphia, about her family's expectations and her decision to leave. Ryder, more slowly and hesitantly, told her about his own past. About growing up in Texas, about the war that had taken his older brother, about the ranch he was building as a way to make something permanent in an impermanent world. "You are building a legacy," Georgia said one evening as they walked along the creek that ran near town. "That is admirable." "I am building a life," Ryder corrected. "A legacy requires children, family. I have not managed that part yet." Georgia looked at him sideways. "Do you want that? Family?" "I do," Ryder admitted. "Someday, when the right woman comes along." "And what would the right woman be like?" Her tone was light, but Ryder sensed the seriousness underneath. He thought about it, choosing his words carefully. "She would be strong, not just physically, but in here." He touched his chest. "She would be brave enough to face hardship without breaking, smart enough to know her own mind. Kind without being weak, independent without being cold." He paused. She would be someone who could fire a pistol shot for help, hold a gun on a stranger until she was sure of his intentions, and then have the grace to trust when trust was warranted. Georgia had stopped walking, her green eyes locked on his. That sounds like a very specific woman. It is. Ryder turned to face her fully. Georgia, I know this is fast. I know we have only known each other a few weeks, but I cannot stop thinking about you. Cannot stop remembering that night in the wilderness, the way you looked in the firelight, the way you looked at me when dawn came and you understood what I was giving you. When dawn came, I understood more than just the sacrifice you were making, Georgia said softly. I understood that I had met someone extraordinary, someone worth knowing, worth caring about. Ryder reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away if she wanted. She did not. His hand cupped her cheek, thumb brushing gently over the last fading traces of a bruise. May I court you proper, Georgia Ellsworth? May I take you to church socials and town dances? May I show up at your door with flowers and hopeful intentions? Yes, Georgia whispered. Yes to all of that. He kissed her then, soft and careful, there beside the creek with the Arizona sunset painting the sky in impossible colors. It was not their first kiss, but it felt like it, felt like the real beginning of something that had started that night in the wilderness. Word spread quickly through Independence that Ryder Owens was courting the new schoolteacher, and the town watched with approval and interest. They made a handsome couple, people said, suited each other. Both were hard workers, both had good hearts, both had the kind of strength you needed to survive and thrive in the territory. Ryder began coming to town every Sunday for church, sitting with Georgia and the Morrisons. Afterward, they would have dinner together, and Ryder would tell stories about his ranch, about the cattle he was raising, about his plans for the future. Georgia listened, asked questions, and slowly began to weave herself into those future plans. One evening in early January, Ryder took Georgia out to see his ranch. It was a ride of a few hours, and Martha Morrison insisted on coming along as chaperone, though she made herself scarce once they arrived, suddenly very interested in examining the garden area. The ranch was modest but well built. A small house, a good barn, corrals for the horses and cattle. The land stretched out in all directions, rough and beautiful, full of potential. Ryder showed Georgia everything, explaining his plans for expansion, for building up his herd, for making this place into something lasting. It is wonderful, Georgia said, standing on the porch of the little house and looking out over the land. You have built something real here, Ryder. I have built the beginning, Ryder said, coming to stand beside her. But it feels incomplete, like it is waiting for something. Georgia turned to him. Waiting for what? Ryder took a deep breath, knowing this was the moment that would determine his future. Waiting for you if you would have it. Georgia, I know this is soon. I know by all rights I should wait longer, court you proper for months before speaking. But I am not a patient man when it comes to things that matter, and you matter more than anything else in my life. He pulled a small box from his pocket, opened it to reveal a simple gold ring with a small ruby. This was my grandmother's. It is the only thing I brought with me from Texas. I want you to have it, want you to marry me and build this life together. Georgia's eyes filled with tears, but she was smiling. Yes, she said without hesitation. Yes, I will marry you. Ryder pulled her into his arms, kissing her deeply, sealing the promise. When they finally pulled apart, both breathless and grinning like fools, Martha Morrison appeared from around the corner of the house, not even pretending she had not been listening. About time, Martha declared. I was starting to think you were going to wait until spring, and that seemed needlessly slow given how you two look at each other. They were married in March, just as the desert was beginning to bloom. The whole town turned out for the wedding, held in the little church on Main Street. Georgia wore a simple white dress that Martha had helped her make, and Ryder wore his best suit, cleaned and pressed for the occasion. Sheriff Hayes stood up as Ryder's best man, and Martha Morrison stood with Georgia. The ceremony was brief and heartfelt. When the preacher pronounced them husband and wife, Ryder kissed Georgia with all the feeling he had been holding back during the weeks of proper courtship. The town cheered, and the celebration that followed lasted well into the night. They spent their first night as a married couple at the ranch, and it felt to both of them like coming home. Georgia had already brought out some of her things, already started making the small house into a home. Now it was official. This was their place, their future, their life together. The first years of marriage were not easy. The ranch required constant work, and money was often tight. Georgia continued teaching for a while, riding into town 3 days a week to work with the children. The income helped, but more than that, she loved the work and was not ready to give it up. Ryder never asked her to. He understood that she needed her own purpose beyond being a rancher's wife. They worked together, building the ranch slowly and steadily. Georgia proved to have a good head for business, helping Ryder negotiate better prices for his cattle and managing their finances with skill. In the evenings, they would sit on the porch together, watching the sun set over their land and talk about the future. About the cattle they would raise, the horses they would breed, the children they hoped to have someday. Those conversations were Georgia's favorite part of each day, the quiet intimacy of planning a life with someone she loved. The summer of their second year of marriage brought the first real test. A drought hit southern Arizona hard, and water became scarce. Ryder spent long days riding the range, checking on cattle and trying to keep them alive. Georgia rode beside him more often than not, having temporarily closed the school for summer break. Together they hauled water, moved cattle to better grazing, and prayed for rain that did not come. "We might lose half the herd," Ryder said one evening, exhaustion clear in his voice. "I do not know how else to prevent it." Georgia took his hand, lacing her fingers through his. "Then we lose half the herd and we rebuild. We have done it before, we will do it again. As long as we have each other, we have everything that truly matters." Ryder pulled her close, resting his forehead against hers. "How did I get so lucky to have you? You gave your horse to a stranded woman," Georgia reminded him with a small smile. "You were kind when you did not have to be. The universe rewarded that." They lost 40% of their cattle that summer, but they survived. And Georgia was right. They rebuilt. By the following spring, with good rains and careful management, the herd was growing again. It was also in that spring that Georgia discovered she was pregnant. She told Ryder one evening over dinner, simply stating that they should probably think about adding another room to the house because they would be needing it come fall. Ryder stared at her for a long moment, the words not quite processing. Then understanding dawned and his face transformed with joy. "A baby! We are having a baby, we are," Georgia confirmed, laughing as Ryder leaped up and swept her into his arms, spinning her around the kitchen. The pregnancy was not easy. Georgia suffered from terrible morning sickness for the first few months, and the Arizona summer heat made everything worse. Ryder fussed over her constantly, trying to do everything himself so she could rest. Georgia bore his hovering with patience, understanding it came from love and concern. In October, with Martha Morrison serving as midwife and Ryder pacing anxiously outside, Georgia gave birth to a healthy baby boy. They named him Matthew Thomas Owens, the middle name honoring the doctor who had taken them both in and helped them find each other. Ryder held his son for the first time and felt his entire world shift. This tiny person, this perfect combination of him and Georgia, represented everything he had been building toward. Legacy, Family, future. He is beautiful, Ryder whispered, tears streaming unashamedly down his face. Just like his mother. Georgia smiled tiredly from the bed. He has your eyes, and I suspect he will have your stubborn streak too. Matthew proved to be a relatively easy baby, which was fortunate because the ranch did not stop needing work. Georgia adapted to motherhood with the same determination she brought to everything else, balancing caring for Matthew with helping Ryder whenever possible. She had given up teaching in town, but she found she did not miss it as much as she thought she would. This new role, mother and rancher's wife, fulfilled her in ways she had not expected. The years flowed by, marked by the rhythm of ranch life. Good years and hard years, profits and losses, growth and setbacks. Through it all, Ryder and Georgia worked side by side, their love deepening with each shared challenge and triumph. When Matthew was 3, Georgia became pregnant again. This time it was twins, a surprise that left them both shocked and delighted. She gave birth to a girl and another boy, whom they named Caroline Rose and James William. The house suddenly felt very full and very loud, and Ryder built the addition they had been talking about, adding 2 more bedrooms and expanding the kitchen. 3 children, Ryder said one night, watching Georgia nurse the twins while Matthew played at their feet. We have 3 children. When did that happen? When you gave your horse to a stranded woman, Georgia replied, a familiar answer to a familiar question. Over the years, it had become something of a joke between them, this constant tracing back to that pivotal moment in the wilderness. But it was true. Everything good in their lives traced back to that night. The night Ryder had chosen kindness over convenience. The night Georgia had chosen to trust a stranger in the darkness. The night they had both somehow known, even without saying it, that something important was beginning. The children grew. Matthew was indeed stubborn like his father, but also thoughtful and good with animals. Caroline was spirited and brave, always climbing things she should not and exploring places she was warned away from. James was the gentle one, preferring books to cattle, more interested in drawing than riding. Georgia taught them all at home, providing them with the education she had once given to other people's children. Ryder taught them about the land, about respecting nature and working with it rather than against it. Together, they raised their children to be strong, kind, and capable. Independence continued to grow around them. The town that had been rough and raw when Georgia first arrived became more civilized with each passing year. Schools were built, churches established, businesses flourished. Ryder and Georgia were considered pillars of the community, people whose opinion mattered and whose help could be counted on their 10th wedding anniversary. Ryder surprised Georgia with a trip back to the canyon ridge where they had first met. They rode out together, leaving the children with the Morrisons, and made camp in almost the exact spot where Georgia's stagecoach had overturned. You ever think about how different our lives would be if I had ridden a different route that day? Ryder asked as they sat by the fire, watching stars emerge in the darkening sky. If I had been an hour earlier or later, if you had taken a different stagecoach all the time, Georgia admitted, but I have stopped thinking of it as chance or luck. I think we were meant to find each other. The universe, fate, God, whatever you want to call it, put us both in that exact place at that exact time because we belong together. Ryder pulled her close, kissing the top of her head. That is a beautiful way to think about it. It is the true way to think about it, Georgia insisted. When dawn came that morning, when I was riding away on Juniper, I looked back and saw you standing there. And I knew I would see you again. I knew that giving me your horse was not an ending but a beginning. When dawn came, I understood why I gave you Juniper, Ryder said softly. not just because it was the right thing to do, but because you were worth any sacrifice. Even then, after just one night, I knew you were someone special, someone worth betting my future on. They made love under the stars that night, in the place where their story had begun, and it felt like coming full circle. They were not the same people they had been 10 years ago. Life had weathered them, shaped them, deepened them. But the connection that had sparked in the darkness remained, stronger now for being tested and proven. Years continued to pass. Matthew grew into a man, taking on more responsibility at the ranch until he was essentially running it alongside his father. Caroline married a young surveyor who came through town, and they settled nearby, starting their own family. James went east to study art, sending home drawings and paintings that showed remarkable talent. Ryder and Georgia watched their children build their own lives and felt the particular bittersweet pride of parents who have done their job well. The ranch was prosperous now, one of the most successful in southern Arizona. They had built something lasting, just as Ryder had dreamed of all those years ago. On a warm evening in late spring, with the desert blooming in impossible colors, Ryder and Georgia sat on their porch together. They were both in their 50s now, hair touched with gray, faces lined by years of sun and wind and laughter. But when Ryder looked at Georgia, he still saw the woman who had held a gun on him in the darkness, brave and strong and beautiful. "You have any regrets?" Georgia asked suddenly, a question that seemed to come from nowhere. Ryder considered it seriously, as he considered all her questions. "I regret the drought year when we lost so many cattle. I regret not being able to save Jacobson that night you arrived. I regret the times I was short-tempered with the children when I was tired or worried about money." He paused. "But I do not regret a single moment of my life with you, not one. You are the best thing that ever happened to me." Georgia leaned her head on his shoulder. "When you gave me Juniper that morning, I thought you were either the noblest man I had ever met or the craziest. It turns out you were both. And when you rode away at dawn, I thought I would probably never see you again. I thought I was doing one good deed and that would be the end of it." Ryder shook his head at his younger self. "I am glad I was wrong." "We were both wrong about many things," Georgia said, "but we were right about each other. That first night when you kept watch while I slept, when you made sure I was safe, I felt something then, a certainty I could not explain. And when dawn came and you insisted I take your horse, I understood. I understood that I had met someone I could trust completely, someone I could build a life with." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the sun paint the sky in shades of gold and purple. The land stretched out before them, their land, marked by years of work and love. In the distance, they could see Matthew working with the horses. Closer in, Caroline's children played in the yard of her nearby home. Even James, far away in Boston, was connected to this place, to this family they had built. "You think people believe us when we tell the story?" Ryder asked with amusement. "About how we met. It sounds almost too perfect. Cowboy finds stranded woman, gives her his horse, and they fall in love." "The truth often sounds too perfect to be believed," Georgia replied. "But it is our truth, and that is what matters. Besides, the story is not about a cowboy who gave his horse to a stranded woman. It is about two people who found each other in the darkness and chose each other in the light." More years passed, bringing grandchildren and eventually great-grandchildren. The ranch continued to thrive under Matthew's management, and Ryder stepped back gradually, content to offer advice when asked, but otherwise enjoying the quieter pace of age. Georgia wrote long letters to James, who had become a successful artist in the East, but never forgot his Arizona roots. Caroline's children grew up riding the same land their grandparents had claimed and built upon. On the 50th anniversary of their wedding, the entire extended family gathered at the ranch for a celebration. Children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren filled the house and spilled out into the yard. There was food and music and laughter, the kind of joyful chaos that comes from a large, loving family. Ryder stood on the porch, watching his descendants, and felt overwhelmed with gratitude. He was 78 now, still relatively healthy but slowing down. Georgia was 75, her auburn hair gone silver but her green eyes still bright with intelligence and warmth. "Quite a legacy," Sheriff Hayes said, coming to stand beside him. The sheriff was old himself now, long retired but still sharp. "You have done well, Ryder." "We did well," Ryder corrected, nodding toward Georgia, who was surrounded by great-grandchildren begging for a story. "None of this would exist without her." "True enough," Hayes agreed. "You know, I still remember the day she rode into town on Juniper, desperate to send help back to you. I thought to myself, that woman has steel in her spine, and I thought if Ryder gave up his horse for her, she must be something special." "She is," Ryder said simply. "Always has been." That evening, after the guests had left and it was just the two of them again, Ryder and Georgia sat on their porch as they had done thousands of times before. The house was quiet, the land peaceful under the stars. 50 years, Georgia said wonderingly. "It has gone so fast." "And so slow," Ryder added. "I feel like I have known you forever and also like we just met yesterday." Georgia took his hand, the familiar gesture of a lifetime of touching. "Do you remember what you said to me that first night by the fire? You said civilization is not buildings and laws, it is people choosing to help each other when help is needed." "I remember. You lived that philosophy every day of your life. You built more than a ranch, Ryder. You built a family, a community, a legacy of kindness. All because you chose to help a stranded woman one November evening." Ryder kissed her hand gently. "Best decision I ever made." They sat together until the moon rose high, two old people who had loved each other well and built a good life. The desert night sang around them, the same stars that had witnessed their beginning now witnessing their golden years. Time, inevitably, continued its march. Ryder passed away peacefully in his sleep at the age of 82, Georgia beside him as she had been for over 50 years. The funeral was attended by hundreds. Ranchers and townspeople, family and friends, people whose lives had been touched by his kindness and integrity. He was laid to rest on a hill overlooking his ranch, with a view of the land he had loved and built upon. Georgia lived 4 more years, spending her days surrounded by family, telling stories of Ryder and their life together to children and grandchildren who never tired of hearing them. Her favorite story, always, was the one about the night they met. How a stagecoach overturned in the wilderness, how a cowboy appeared at exactly the right moment, how he gave her his horse and waited alone for rescue. "When dawn came, I understood why he did it," Georgia would say, her voice soft with memory and love. "I understood that I had met someone extraordinary, someone who measured wealth not in cattle or money, but in doing what was right. And I knew, even then, that I would love him for the rest of my life." Georgia passed away in her sleep on a warm spring night, with the desert blooming outside her window. She was buried beside Ryder on the hill, their graves marked by simple stones that bore their names and the dates of their long lives. The ranch stayed in the family, passed down through Matthew and then to his children. It prospered and grew, becoming one of the largest operations in southern Arizona. But it was not the size or success that people remembered when they talked about the Owens Ranch. It was the story of how it began. The story of a cowboy who gave his horse to a stranded woman, and the love that grew from that single act of kindness. The story was told and retold, becoming part of the history of independence. School children learned about it. Writers came to research it. And the small canyon ridge where Georgia's stagecoach had overturned became something of a landmark. People would ride out there sometimes, looking at the spot where two lives had intersected and changed the course of multiple generations, because that is what love does, the old-timers would say. Real love, the kind that starts with selflessness and grows through shared trials and mutual respect. That kind of love does not just affect two people. It ripples outward, touching everyone it reaches, creating something that lasts beyond any individual lifetime. When dawn came that November morning in 1874, when Ryder Owens gave his horse to Georgia Ellsworth and waited alone for rescue, neither of them could have imagined what they were starting. They could not have foreseen the children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren who would trace their existence back to that moment. Could not have predicted the ranch that would flourish, the community that would strengthen, the legacy of kindness that would endure. But perhaps, in some deep part of themselves, they knew that this was important, knew that what was happening between them was rare and precious, knew that they had found in the darkness of the wilderness the light that would guide the rest of their lives. The story lived on, passed down through the generations, a testament to the power of kindness, courage, and love. And on quiet nights, when the desert wind whispered through the canyon where it all began, it almost seemed like you could hear it still. The sound of a cowboy and a schoolteacher talking by firelight, the beginning of something that would last forever, the moment when two strangers became everything to each other, all because one man chose to give his horse to a woman who needed it more than he did.